The Conservative Party has unveiled its official platform for the 2019 federal election, and in it is something that any sort of fiscally responsible person has been advocating for in Canada for years. Legislation that would require the government to balance the budget, a balanced budget law that basically means politicians can't, in times of non-recession, run up deficits just for the sake of it, just to spend their way into re-election perhaps. This is something that's especially timely given that 4 years ago when Justin Trudeau and the Liberals were running, they had initially said there'd be a balanced budget, then they said, well, there'd be like a teeny tiny deficit. And then if you look back, the first 3 budgets that Justin Trudeau did racked up a total of about $52 billion in deficit spending. And this year is expected to be a deficit potentially of $20 billion. Now, this is obviously just the beginning. The Liberals' platform for the next 4 years reveals $90 billion in deficit spending cumulatively over the next 4 years, which is absolutely absurd and doesn't, by the way, include a cushion if there is a recession, as many economists are predicting. So the Conservative plan would put forward a law that requires governments to balance the budget. And the premise of this law seems to be that with the exception of in recession times, balance is always possible. But there's a hitch, because Andrew Scheer himself is not planning to balance the budget for the next 4 years. If he's elected, there will not be, under the Conservative plan, a balanced budget for his first 4-year term. Now, what's challenging here is that Andrew Scheer's plan is binding future governments to something that his government is either not willing or not able to do. And it seems like he wants the best of both worlds. He wants to say this is a fiscally responsible plan, and because of this, we're promising to balance the budget by law for future governments. But at the same time, he also wants the goodies and the bonuses that come along within an election, promising to spend more than the government is taking in. Now, the plan that the Conservatives have put forward does require less spending and more revenue, and they've detailed how they're going to get there. For example, they want to put a hiring freeze on in the public sector once we hit 2020-2021. Another plan the Conservatives want to do is rein in consultants and hospitality expenses. Combined, these and other plans will save billions of dollars per year. Obviously, long overdue and very specific measures to find efficiencies. But I go back to the question, if we think that a balanced budget is always attainable, why not bind government starting immediately? I put this question to Andrew Scheer at his platform launch in Delta, British Columbia. This is that exchange.
Good afternoon, Mr. Scheer. Andrew Lawton from True North. So your plan calls for balanced budget legislation, which seems to be based on the premise that a government can every year balance the budget barring unforeseen circumstances. Why then commit future governments to something that you're not prepared to do for 5 years?
Well, we have a lot of work to do to clean up the Liberal mess, and we want to do it in a way that can allow existing core services to be strengthened. We're going to increase those investments in healthcare, education, and social programs by at least 3% every year, while controlling the growth of government spending in other areas, and by eliminating wasteful practices like March Madness, the government hiring outside consultants, spending hundreds of millions of dollars on outside consultants when they have expert public servants who could do the job within the federal departments, and of course by ensuring that government real estate is managed much more efficiently.
So what he says basically is that it's going to take a lot to roll back what the Liberals have been doing. And I understand that. I've been covering this. I've been looking at that spending. I know exactly how bad things are. But I do think there would be a great opportunity here for the Conservatives to lead by example and say, we are so confident in our proclamation that a balanced budget is always possible that we're going to do it by year 2. What's interesting is that I also spoke to Maxime Bernier, and I said, if you have in the PPC potentially the opportunity to hold the balance of power, would you support a Conservative government? Would you support a Conservative minority in a coalition? And he said basically that it would depend on the budget. He would have to look and see, is there something that is, in his view, good for Canada? This is that exchange.
We will look at their legislation, we will look at their each policy, and we'll decide if we support them or not. So that being said, we won't do any compromise with our principle. They will have to do some compromise to have our support. So step by step, policy by policy, we'll judge them.
So we have the opportunity for a budget that is going to be much more reined in than the one that Justin Trudeau has promised. But again, I think it's a start in the right direction, but we cannot get anywhere as a country unless we balance sooner rather than later. For True North, I'm Andrew Lawton.